What do you do when your life gets interrupted? When the plans you made or expectations you have get rejected? When life gets interrupted, we need to answer the question, where is God in all of this? Together, we will learn from the life of Joseph how God turns life's interruptions for evil into divine interventions for good.
How many times should you forgive someone? Some of you are like, I already used my one. You know, this is an interesting question, and as we're going to be talking about forgiveness, there's inevitably people in our life who we've had to forgive multiple times. Raise your hand if you have somebody in your life, a multiple grace person. Some of you are like, yeah, I'm sitting next to them right now. I didn't say raise your hands for that. Some of you are raising your hands like, you know, Peter asked this question to Jesus, and he said, Jesus, how many times should I forgive my brother who sinned against me? And he says, as many as 7 times? Thinking that 7 was like, wow, that's, you know, if someone's offended me 7 times, Jesus, I'm 7 times forgiving them, that's a lot. And Jesus' response was, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. So those of you that are good at math, that's 490. The rest of us, you're like, yeah, I was an English guy. The question that follows then is this: do I need to walk around with a clicker for my spouse who's always letting me down? Or do I need to walk around with a clicker for that boss that's always just pushing me to the edge and offending me? Do I need to walk around with a clicker? And right when I'm around 480, boom. 481, boom. 482. After that point, do I no longer forgive the person in my life once I've hit 490? It would be nice. 490 is a principle that Jesus is giving Peter to tell him, hey, the life that we should live, listen, you're going to be hurt, you're going to be harmed, you're going to be disrespected, you're going to have relationships in your life, typically the people that are closest to you, they're going to harm you, that are going to hurt you, that you're going to have to forgive. And if you want to walk in the example of how Jesus walked, that the number should be limitless. That we should live a lifestyle of continual forgiveness to those that harm us. How many of us have been hurt and damaged by somebody in our life, and even thinking about forgiving them is just a challenging thought? I mean, someone who really, really, really has harmed you and damaged you. Someone who really, man, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, how many men I've talked to who looked me in the eye. They're in their 40s, and they've told me, Josiah, you know, I have something against my dad. You know, my dad never told me he loved me. Yeah, he supported the family, he was there, but he never told me the words, I love you. And it's a hurt, it's a harm, it's an area that needs to be dealt with in their life. There's some that it's a spouse issue. You feel like we've dealt with this issue over and over and over again, and you're at a point, you've forgiven them in the past, and now you learn something new and it's hard. You're thinking, can I forgive them again? What if they do it again? There's areas in our life that we're going to be hurt. We're going to be damaged. We're going to have people that say stuff and speak things into our life. And the challenge for us is, are we willing to forgive those that harm us and damage us? Are we willing to forgive those that we feel like they don't deserve forgiveness? Are we willing to forgive those that we feel like the magnitude of what they've done is beyond forgiveness? Are we willing to forgive those that we feel like are unforgivable? Because the challenge is, if we choose not to forgive those people, unforgiveness keeps us stuck and bound. And so you can be reading your Bible and praying to God, but if there's unforgiveness in our heart, an area of our life that somebody in the past, it could have been 40 years ago, You haven't seen this person, but there's an area of your life that you're holding unforgiveness. Let me tell you that this morning, unforgiveness always equates to being stuck. And I love this church, and I want to see this church move forward because we're all going to have to deal with areas of unforgiveness, and I want this church to be able to forgive and move forward for even the difficult situations where you feel like that's beyond forgiveness. There's a story that we'll be finishing up today in Genesis chapter 42. It's the story of Joseph. And if you've joined us over the last couple of weeks, man, Joseph's story, you look at the stories in the Bible, Joseph's story is one of those that I would wrestle with forgiving the people that hurt me. Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery. I've had some fights with my siblings growing up, but I never sold anybody into slavery, right? I mean, that's pretty extreme. His brothers hate him so much that they sell him into slavery. And Joseph starts working. He's as a slave in Egypt. He gets accused of rape, gets thrown into prison for years, even though he did nothing. He was innocent. Joseph interprets 2 dreams in the prison. And this brings him before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh has a dream that's plaguing him night after night after night. And so he says, none of my magic men, none of the men who can interpret things, the divine, have done anything for me. Joseph, what makes you think that you can interpret this dream? And Joseph says, it's not me, but it's God. And Joseph interprets a dream and says, in 7 years, there will be 7 years of plenty in the land. And after that, there will be 7 years of famine. Pharaoh says, Joseph, you have interpreted by the gift of God. I will make you the second most powerful man in Egypt. The 7 years of plenty go by. We're 2 years into the worst famine. Nothing is growing in all the land. Joseph is at the tables counting the grain, making sure it gets distributed, and he sees the people that he hasn't seen in 20 years. The people that he never hoped to see again, he sees the brothers who sold him into slavery. You have anybody in your life that you try to avoid? You have anybody in your life that really has deeply, deeply offended you, and to even say a word about them, it's like to even say one word nice about them, it feels like you're pulling teeth. Joseph runs into his brothers who have sold him into slavery. He's thought about that moment for years and years and years, and here they are begging for grain. And Joseph accuses them of being spies. They don't recognize Joseph because they haven't seen him in 20 years. And Joseph says, you're spies. And verse 10, they reply, no, my Lord, they answered, your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies. You know, that's a strange statement to say to the guy that you sold into slavery and then lied to his dad that you're an honest person. These guys who Joseph hasn't seen in 20 years, they don't recognize him. And really, the first sentence that they say to him is, hey, we want grain, and by the way, we're honest men. We're not spies. I mean, that had to rub Joseph just a little bit wrong. Like, you guys are going to say that you're honest people in front of me? I know you sold me into slavery and lied about my death. The first step in forgiveness I want you to write down this morning and keep track of is to forgive, we have to wrestle with the emotions. And many times they're mixed emotions. The first emotion that Joseph has after seeing his brothers in 20 years is an emotion of anger. Can I tell you that the emotion of anger is not a sin, but James says that anger does not lead to the righteous life that God desires? So having anger is not sin. We see that Jesus himself had anger, but what we do in our anger can be sin. Sometimes the anger that we have over a situation of forgiveness makes us do some really stupid stuff. You know, I think of all the dumb things I've done in anger, and one of the dumb things that I've done in anger, I was thinking in the back, I remember getting really, really angry. I was in a conversation with my dad, and I was going down into the basement. I remember I had a juice box in my hand, one of those like Capri Sun juice boxes, and it wasn't open yet. I was so mad, and so our basement is unfinished, and you know, I'm the first one doing dumb, stupid stuff when you're angry. And I took this juice box, and I remember looking at the wall. I was so mad. I came down the stairs, and I took it. I chugged it so hard against the wall. Can I encourage you to never do that? That thing exploded like a water balloon. Poof! And it went all over the place. One moment of anger exploded something. I was cleaning that mess up for weeks. Can I tell you that in our anger, no matter what the person has done to you, sometimes in our anger, we can say things that the repercussions come for weeks, months, and years? That sometimes in an anger, what they've done to you is wrong. It's injustice. You want to get back, so you get back at them. You do something, say something, take an action, that the repercussions of it come back. You're cleaning up that mess for months and years to come because of something that you said in anger that you felt like was justified because of a wrong that was done against you. See, anger is an emotion that was given to us by God. But if we allow anger to rule our life, especially in light of unforgiveness, that somebody has wronged you, you start learning the details about what they did. You thought it was this, but now you find out, wow, they did it against you. They were intentional. And you take that, and if you, in your anger, you can say things that can rip and tear people down that will affect them for years to come. So should Joseph have been angry? Yeah. Yeah, his brothers sold him into slavery, took him away from his dad and his mom, sold him into slavery. But in wrestling with your emotions, let me challenge you. If you're dealing with a situation or you've dealt with a situation, you feel like, man, this is a wrong against you, can I challenge you to give yourself some distance from the person that has wronged you while you wrestle with the emotions so you don't say or do something that you will regret down the road? Wrestle with the emotions. Wrestle with the anger. But don't allow the anger to lead you to sin. I imagine that Joseph thought that this chapter was over. You know, I've talked to some people, and typically these happen at the Encounter Retreat, and I'll talk to somebody about dealing with a forgiveness issue. And, they'll tell me something that happened 25 years ago, and they'll say, this person damaged me and hurt me, and that's the reason, that I am how I am today. And I look at the person and I say, what was done to you was wrong, but don't allow the past to define your future. Some of us allow one moment in our life, and I don't want to take away the damage and the impact and the influence it made upon your life, but don't use an event excuse to drive the rest of the events of your life. When something happens to us as damaging as something like Joseph, 20 years, 1 year, a reoccurring thing that you find out months later that you were being cheated on over and over and over, you have to wrestle with that now. You got to go to work, think about work, try to get the day done, and you know that you were cheated on month after month, and you're just trying to deal with the ramifications. You say, how am I supposed to not be angry? How am I supposed to deal with this? See, just because something is in the past, like Joseph, even though it was 20 years or it's 5 years ago, and you haven't seen that person in years or months, doesn't mean that the issue was dealt with. Just because something has had time, there's been time between an event that's happened and your life that's continued, doesn't mean that you've dealt with the issue. And the other emotion we see come out as he's wrestling with these emotions is in verse 24, Joseph's brothers who are speaking in Hebrew, he's speaking Egyptian through a translator, so they don't know it's him. He can understand his brothers after they come out of 3 days of being in jail. And his brothers are saying, the reason we're getting treated how we're treated, they're speaking amongst each other, is because of what we did to Joseph 20 years ago. They're dealing with the guilt. They're dealing with the weight of their actions. And Joseph, when he hears, verse 24, here's the second emotion. He turned away from them and began to weep. But then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. If you were to ask Joseph in his high position of power, Joseph, life is going great. It must be amazing. Is there anything that you need to, that you really shaped you or formed you? Is there anything wrong in your life? It seems like life is going perfect. I imagine Joseph has all the power in the world. He has the prestige. He has the glory. His life is finally taken a turn for the right. It finally feels like it's going in the right direction. And his brothers are brought into the picture. See, in the middle of Joseph's life, 20 years have passed by, but Joseph never dealt with the core issue of his hurt against his brothers. So really on the inside, he was still that 17-year-old boy who had been sold into slavery and was still broken over a traumatic event in his life. Just because 20 years had gone by didn't mean that the situation hadn't been dealt with. See, to be able to move forward in something, you have to be willing to let go. Forgiveness is about holding something over somebody's head. Unforgiveness is about holding something that says, you owe me this right. You need to apologize to me. You need to right the wrong. And until you do that, I will hold this wrong over your head. Until you do that, I will bring this up over and over. Until you do that, I will not let you go in my heart. And forgiveness says, let them go. Forgiveness says, let them go and let God. Forgiveness requires time and process to deal with the internal emotions that are conflicting. You know, when I have dealt with these situations in my life between me and other people of deep, deep hurt in areas that I need to forgive, the easiest thing to do is just let time go by. And the scary thing is that I've talked with people at funerals and wakes who have just let the time go by. And now they look at a corpse who they haven't seen in years, and they wish for just a moment they would have been able to speak to that person and deal with the problem that they have with that person, but the time is gone. The Bible says make the most of every opportunity. If there is a situation in your life that you feel like this person has wronged me and damaged me, and I don't know if I could ever let go of this person, I just need more time. Can I tell you that maybe that time won't be there? Maybe you won't have 6 more months to talk to that person. Maybe you won't have 1 more year to talk to that person, and the next time you'll speak to them is standing over a corpse of a brother or a sister, a parent or a friend who you feel like wronged you, but now you can't deal with it. Now you can't have that conversation that you wanted to have. Brothers and sisters, deal with your issues and your unforgiveness while you still have the time. I believe that forgiveness, as challenging as it is, I believe that forgiveness starts not in a face-to-face conversation where you sit across a table and sip coffee and talk about the hurt. I think forgiveness starts on your knees before the Lord dealing with your heart. I don't think it starts when you sit in a Starbucks and you're looking across the person that has harmed you and wronged you and you finally bring the words to your throat. I don't think that's when forgiveness starts. I believe forgiveness starts on your knees before the Lord, dealing with your heart, praying to God, give me the strength that I need to be able to forgive this person that has so wronged me. Would you give me the strength and the will to be able to say what I need to say and even get the words out? God, would you give me the strength? Number 2, to forgive, we must forgive without expecting anything. This is a long story, but I'm going to continue on with the next 2 chapters. So, Joseph tests his brothers. He wants to see if there's genuinely a change or if they're just the same old brothers that he knew 20 years ago. So he tests them. He keeps one of the brothers, Simeon, in a jail cell in Egypt, and he sends the other brothers home. He says, if you truly are not spies and you are honest men, I'll send you with some grain to last you for a little bit. But I want you to bring back your youngest brother, Benjamin, that you've told me about. and if you bring him back, I'll give you all the grain that you request. Now, this was a problem for the brothers, because the brothers go home to the father Jacob and say, hey, the ruler in Egypt, he was really tough on us. He thought we were spies. He only gave us a little bit of grain to survive for a little bit longer. And for us to have more grain and to get Simeon free, we have to bring Benjamin. His father immediately refuses. You're not taking my last son. I already lost Joseph. I'm not going to lose Benjamin too. There's no way you're taking him. No, no, no. But they get to a point of desperation where the food starts to run out and they're forced to go back to Egypt. How many of us know that sometimes God closes all the doors and forces us to go down the hard path? Think about that. That the only place that these guys can get food is Egypt. And Egypt is where Joseph is at. And so for them to deal with the problem, they have to go face on. They can't go a different direction. God is forcing this collision to happen. And you know what? God sometimes does that in our lives too. That we just want to move on. We want to be distanced from this person. We don't want them near us. We don't want to have to deal with that situation anymore. And yet God closes all the other doors and now you're sitting on a desk next to them. God closes all the other doors and now they're a family member because they married in. Don't point, don't. God closes all the other doors and now it's somebody that you have to brush shoulders with in the church that hurt you years before. And God has closed the doors because God is forcing you to deal with the things that's in the past. God wants you to purge the unforgiveness. See, this story was coming to a climax. This story was coming to an end. So the brothers come back to Egypt. They all arrive there. All the brothers are there. They finally get a seat in front of Joseph. And Joseph gives them the food. He sets up this lavish dinner for them and sends all of them along with their bags of grain. But he had one more final test. He put his own silver cup inside Benjamin's bag. He sent them off, and then he sent his people, his soldiers, to go get them and bring them back. The brothers are one final time standing before Joseph. And Joseph says, how could you have done this? I let you eat at my table. I let you take the grain. How could you have stolen? The person that's stolen from me will be put in prison or executed. Joseph knows who this is. He knows Benjamin is the one. He's testing his brothers. The bags start getting slit open. They start getting cut open. And the silver cup falls out of Benjamin's bag. Joseph says, arrest this man. This is the one. He'll be put in jail. None of you other brothers will have to be put in jail. Just this one. And the brothers, especially Judah comes forward and he says this. In verse 33, now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of Benjamin. And let the boy return home with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father. His brothers had changed. 20 years later, when they were put in the same situation, they decided his own brother, Judah, was the main one that had sold Joseph into slavery. Judah was the one who steps forward and says, no, I can't have my dad go through that again. Put me in jail. I'll take the blame for what Benjamin did. Please take me. Don't let my dad suffer. He had genuinely changed. You know, it's easier, not easy, but easier to forgive somebody when you see a truly repentant heart. When someone's wronged you and they come before you and they're really like, I am so sorry. I'll do whatever I can to right your wrong. I apologize for everything I've done. Please, let me make this right. When somebody comes before you in that type of attitude, it's easier. It's not easy, but it's easier to forgive. But can I tell you that not every story ends like that? Not every story when you look across somebody and you're sitting at that table or they're at your house and you finally had the sit down, you're finally looking them in the eyes, you finally mustered the courage and the energy to be able to stand across this person and tell them how you truly feel, how you truly were affected by their actions. Not every time will somebody reciprocate and say, I forgive you too. I was wrong. I want to deal with my actions. I talked to a lot of people who have mustered up the courage and the energy to finally have that conversation with the ex, to finally have that conversation with that boss, to finally have that conversation with the spouse, and they sit there or their parent and they're across from them and they pour out their heart's on the table, they're vulnerable, and the person goes, are you done? Are you finished with that? Are you good? You feel better now? If you wait for somebody to say sorry or to give you the forgiveness or the type of response you're looking for, you may never forgive them. I remember I got into a fight with my brother Grant. It was a while ago, but he's in the back. I got into a fight with my brother Grant. And how many of you know that sometimes when you bring an issue before someone, you just kind of want to know that they understand you, right? I mean, that's part of forgiveness, that they understand your situation, right? So Grant, I remember we were at church, and Grant was wearing a shirt. He was wearing one of my shirts. And he had asked me, once again, you're wearing my shirt? He had asked me, can I wear this shirt? And I said, no. It's my new shirt. It's from Dada. It's real nice. Got some dots on it. And he's like, no, can I wear it? I said, no, Grant, you can't wear it. Just wash your laundry. Like, you'll have some shirts clean. No. And it was clear. I left. I went to church. And then I come to church. And I'm seeing people, and I see Grant. The world freezes around me. And I just see Grant walking. I'm like, either he got a shirt that's exactly the same, or he's just blatantly wearing my shirt that I want. So he left, I drove home, we got home. I don't think my parents were there because this escalated quick. And I went to Grant and I said, Grant, were you wearing my shirt? I told you not to wear my shirt. Oh, yeah, I was kind of wearing it, yeah. You want to, say something? Do you want to, like I told you not to wear it. You heard me, right? Yeah, I heard it. Is there anything, anything you want to say or, anything you want to do? Like you really harmed me. It's my favorite shirt. He's like, okay. I think he was playing his game or something. I'm like, oh, it just makes it so much worse. It's like, I want you to understand. I told you not to. You knew, and then you took it. Like, just understand. And it escalated, and we start wrestling, and then we're fighting. I don't know if this is probably a guy thing. This is probably a guy thing, but I don't know if you've ever you're headlocking somebody and you're holding on so tightly because you don't want to let go because you don't know what they're going to do. That was one of those situations. I was like, listen, I don't want to let this dude go right now because this dude is angry. And so I remember we got in a fight, and it was after a Sunday. And I remember calling my dad on the phone and just feeling really, really convicted over it. And I remember thinking about it. And I first felt convicted by the Spirit of God. That's usually how it is, right? You're in a room, things have calmed down, and like God's like, boom, boom. Like, what was that all about? And I remember God convicting me, saying, Josiah, why would you act like that? Like, you're representing me. Why would you choose to act like that? Think about how you represented yourself to your brother. Think about your actions. Think about the repercussions. I know you were angry, but think about the repercussions of your actions. You're a representative of me. You're a man of God, and yet you're showing yourself to act out in anger and emotion because you're angry and you're frustrated and you feel like you've been offended. Sometimes we just want the right response. Sometimes I just want you to understand and get my issue. And that's what it is with forgiveness. But if you wait for somebody to understand the person that's grieved you, the person that's wronged you, if you wait for that person to give you the perfect response in the perfect situation of how they wronged you and how it was so wrong and all this and explain and repercussion, if you wait for that, it might never happen. See, forgiveness The prerequisite for forgiveness is not a changed heart or a heart condition. It's obedience. See, we forgive first because we obey God. God has told us to forgive those that have wronged us. And there's times where you feel like it's wrong and your emotions are hot and heavy and you just feel like, man, I just want them to make it right. But some of our situations in life, they will never be made right through an action. There's nothing that somebody can do that completely make that right wrong, to make what they did to you make it right. But that's not your job. See, God didn't say, I want you to forgive people if they, pay the price of their wrong. God didn't say, I want you to forgive people if they really put together a great apology and they really mean it. I want you to forgive people if their hearts really change and you could say fruit of repentance. No, God has called us as his people to forgive people regardless of their heart change. Mark 11:25 says, and whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone. If you have a situation in front of you where you feel like, man, I need to forgive this person. I need to deal with this wrong. I need to deal with something in the past. I need to deal with something right now where I feel like somebody's wronged me and I just have an issue with this person. I know because I can't speak a word about him nice. I know because I avoid him at all costs. I know because I feel, man, I just don't want to be around them. If there's an issue like that in your life, I want you to prepare yourself to deal with the forgiveness regardless if they discredit you, regardless if they don't understand you, regardless if they okay, are you done? I want you to be prepared to go in and forgive them and make yourself right with the Lord, because that's what matters. Last and not least, but I think probably the most important, is forgive from a changed perspective. So Judah comes and he says, listen, I'll take the spot of Benjamin, put me in jail, just let Benjamin go home, please. And Joseph responds like this. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been a famine in the land. And for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and no reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. This is a man who spent 20 years away from his family because someone harmed him. This is a man who was betrayed by his own blood, sold to be a slave. He lived a privileged life and his brothers just sold him away to be a slave. He spent years in jail for being an innocent person, and that comes ultimately from what his brothers had done. It led right to that. I mean, he's choosing to let go and to forgive people that have damaged him, changed his life, alter it. He gets no second chance, and yet he's still choosing to forgive them. Why? Because he has a changed perspective of the situation. See, what Joseph is saying is, hey, listen, you sold me into slavery, and it ruined my life. That's what Joseph used to say. But now Joseph's saying, I was sold into slavery and it saved many lives. See, Joseph has taken a step back and realized that our God is big enough to use the harm, to use the wrongs, to use the things that have been done against you, that you feel like no good can come from this. God is big enough, divine enough, sovereign enough to be able to work events. He didn't want this to happen to you. But God can use even the evil that other people bring into your life to benefit you and for his glory. See, a lot of times we think that the evil and the wrong that's done to us, that it only leads to one thing. It only leads to one end. Bad can only lead to bad. But in God's story, God can reweave your life. God can take the wrong and the bad that's done and reweave it for his glory and your good. Something that someone's damaged in your life, God can still use it for your benefit. Sometimes we don't understand that until we're out of the storm. Sometimes we don't understand that till the chapter is over in life. And we're able to look back and realize, wow, have you ever heard somebody tell their story? They go through something so traumatic and they say, I wouldn't take that out of my life because it made me who I am today. See, some of the most difficult, tough things in your life have made you who you are today. And you wouldn't be the same person without them in your life. See, God has used some of the things in your life to develop you and change you. God has used some of the things that you despise in your life, and He's behind the scenes changing those and making them a benefit to you. That's how big and powerful our God is. I leave you with this. Forgiving someone is not diminishing it. It's not saying it's okay. It's not minimizing the damage. Forgiving someone is not a sign of weakness because you've done it first. It's actually the opposite. Forgiving somebody is not letting an undeserved person win. How do we forgive? I believe the most powerful thing in understanding and being able to forgive the people that have wronged us is having a changed perspective. My changed perspective comes from Colossians 3:13, which says, bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has grievances against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. See, what's so powerful about that is that's the changed perspective that we as Christians can hold. That's the changed perspective that we can have is the people that have wronged you, all the wrong that's been done, that God has forgiven you, first of all. I think it's important to understand. When I run into people who they tell me, Josiah, you just don't understand. You just don't get the damage that somebody did to me. You don't understand what that person did to me. They came in a room night after night. You don't understand the damage that caused on me. You don't understand the words of my dad ripping me apart, the lies that play in my head. You don't understand the damage that person did to me in the marriage. You don't understand the damage that friend, the total betrayal of trust that friend did to me. So you probably don't understand it all. And I have my own things. But you know what? When I have a difficulty forgiving someone, I don't remember the wrongs that they've done against me. I remember the wrongs I've done against God. And I remember how much God has forgiven me. That God has forgiven me for every single time I've ever lied about something. God has forgiven me for every time I've ever had pride in my heart. God has forgiven me for the multiple idols and things I put above Him. God has forgiven me for every moment of lust. God has totally and completely forgiven me. And so when I remember just the amazingness of what God has done, the forgiveness that past, present, and future, every sin, it doesn't stick to me because I'm covered with the blood of Jesus. When I understand the power of what He's done, the magnitude of the grievances I've done against Him, and yet He chose to forgive me, I'm always challenged with this question. How can I not forgive this person when God has forgiven me so much? How can I not forgive this person of what they've done if God has forgiven me of so much? See, we forgive because we've been forgiven. When you understand how much God has forgiven you, if you understand all that God has done for you, how could you hold somebody else in a jail cell if God's freed you from your jail cell? How could you try to take somebody's freedom away from you when God has given you your freedom? How could you hold something over somebody else's head when God doesn't hold it against you? I've done this exercise many times, but sometimes I just need to take a single piece of paper when someone I feel like has really wronged me and really offended me, and I start writing down a list of my sins just from the day. I start writing down a list of the sins from the week after that. Every sin, every wrong I can imagine from the last month. And then I do the last 6 months, I do the last year, and then I just start remembering all the sins in my life, the ones that have really weighed me, the ones I'm really shameful of, the things I've really done wrong, and then I hold this against the person. I hold this up to what the person has done. I say, this is all that God has forgiven me of. of my wrongs. There was a record of every single wrong. And yet through the blood of Jesus, when I stand before the throne, God crushes that. It's not even there. There's no record of my wrong when I stand before the throne, the King of all kings. There is no record in heaven of my wrongs. There is no record of in heaven of any sin that I have ever committed. I stand righteous before the throne of God, forgiven before Jesus because of what he's done on the cross. So how can I hold somebody else's wrongs? How can I hold their list of wrongs to them?